Let me start with a question. If two couples are both 60 years old, and one has $1.5 million, while the other has $4 million, which one is actually free to stop working? Most people assume the second couple. Bigger pile of money, safer choice, end of story. But that is not always how retirement works, and the reason usually shows up earlier than people think. Here is the quiet mistake. A lot of good savers treat age 65 like the first real decision point. They tell themselves, I just need to hang on until Medicare age, then I'll look at retirement, so they keep working full-time, almost by default. Not because they ran the numbers, not because they built a plan, just because 65 feels like the official finish line. But for many households, the real turning point shows up earlier, at 59 and a half. And no, I am not talking about doing something reckless or draining accounts too soon. This is not a pep talk for careless withdrawals. This is about something much more practical. It is about whether full-time work is still truly necessary, or whether you may already have more options than you realize. That is where two households with similar habits can wind up in very different places. One couple understands the window that opens after 59.5 and starts using it carefully.
The other keeps waiting for 65 because that is what everybody says.
Same decade of life, same broad goal, very different outcome. In this video, I want to show you why that half-year mark matters so much. First, a rule changes. And that can give your retirement savings a different kind of usefulness. Second, a planning window opens. And that can help you make smarter tax moves before later rules start pushing you around. And third, there is a simple way to think through the decision so you are not guessing, not drifting, and not working extra years just because nobody ever showed you the map. That middle piece, the tax window, is the one many people miss. And it can quietly shape the rest of retirement more than they expect. So let's make the rule plain. Before age 59 and a half, if you pull money out of most traditional IRAs or 401ks, the IRS usually hits you with two costs. First, ordinary income tax. Second, a 10% early withdrawal penalty. That penalty is the extra sting, the quiet little fine for touching retirement money too soon. Here's a simple example. Say Robert is 58 and takes $20,000 from his traditional IRA. That money can be added to his taxable income for the year. And on top of that, he may owe a 10% penalty. That's another $2,000 gone right out of the gate.
Not because he invested badly. Not because the market fell. Just because of timing. Now at 59 and a half, that extra 10% penalty generally goes away from most retirement accounts. That is the big rule change. Not magic, not tax-free. Just the removal of that one penalty. And this part matters, my friend. The income tax does not disappear on traditional accounts. If you take money from a traditional IRA or traditional 401k, it is still usually taxed as ordinary income. In plain English, the IRS still treats that withdrawal like taxable paycheck-type money. The penalty goes away. The tax bill does not. There are a few exceptions before 59 and a half. I'll keep these brief. Certain disability situations. Some large medical expenses. And what's called the rule of 55, for some 401k plans, if you leave your job at the right age. Those exceptions are real, but don't get lost in that side road right now. The main road is this: 59 and a half is where the extra toll booth usually lifts. And that is exactly why this age matters so much, not because it means, great, now I can start draining my accounts. No. That would miss the whole point. The real opportunity is that your retirement accounts start becoming usable planning tools. Tools on the workbench. Money you can choose to use, or not use, based on taxes, timing, and what the rest of your income looks like. Think of 59 and a half like getting a master key. The door opens. But smart folks don't run through every open door. They look around first. They decide which door to open, when to open it, and how far to go. That shift, from locked up to flexible, is where the real value lives. Because once the penalty is out of the way, you can start asking better questions. Should this money come out this year or later? How does it affect taxes? What happens to Medicare costs down the road? Those answers are where the real leverage is. If this feels like alphabet soup, take a breath. You're doing just fine. The rule itself is simple. What matters next is how to use that freedom carefully. Here's the mindset shift that changes everything. While you're working, income usually comes one way: a paycheck. It shows up on a schedule. Taxes come out before you even touch it. There's not much room to steer. You can earn more, earn less, or stop. But the paycheck itself is pretty rigid. Retirement works differently. Once you reach the point where you can access your accounts without that early withdrawal penalty, income stops being just something that happens to you.
It becomes something you can build, piece by piece, source by source. And that is a very different game. Think about a couple like Jim and Carol, both 62. They need $70,000 this year to cover their spending. During their working years, that would have meant one thing: salary. In retirement, that $70,000 might come from several places, some from a traditional IRA or 401k, some from a Roth account, some from a regular brokerage account or savings. Now, those dollars may all spend the same at the grocery store, but at tax time they do not behave the same. Money from a traditional IRA or traditional 401k is usually tax-deferred money. Plain English, you got the tax break earlier, and the bill comes later when you pull it out. That withdrawal is generally taxed as ordinary income. Money from a Roth account is different. If the rules are met, that money can come out tax-free, no ordinary income tax on the withdrawal. Same spending power in your checking account, very different result on the tax return. Then there's money from a taxable account, a brokerage account, bank savings, CDs, things like that. Some of that may be your own principal coming back, some may be interest, dividends, or capital gains. In other words, not every dollar from that bucket lands on your tax return the same way either.
That's the big structural difference. Not all retirement income is built alike. And once you see that, a door opens. Because if your income can come from different sources with different tax treatment, then you may have choices about which source to use first, which one to leave alone, and how much to take from each. That creates room. Room to manage your tax bracket. Room to avoid piling unnecessary income on top of itself. Room to fund the life you want without automatically using the most expensive dollars first. Take a breath here. This is where retirement stops looking like a missing paycheck and starts looking more like a kitchen table plan. Imagine Susan, age 61, needs an extra $12,000 for home repairs and travel. If she takes the whole amount from her traditional IRA, that may push more income onto her tax return. If she mixes sources instead, maybe part from cash savings, part from a brokerage account, part from a Roth, the spending stays the same, but the tax impact may look very different. That's not a trick. That's design. And design matters, because in retirement, the question is not only, do I have enough money? It's also, which dollars should I use, and when? Those are two different questions. Most people only hear the first one.
In the next part, that flexibility starts to matter even more. Because the years after 59 and a half can be useful, not just because money is accessible, but because later rules have not started forcing your hand yet. Here's where this gets more interesting, my friend. For a whole lot of people, the years after work slows down, and before required minimum distributions begin, can be some of the quietest tax years they will ever have. Not always, but often. Your paycheck may be smaller. It may be gone. Social Security may not be turned on yet, or it may be modest. And those big forced withdrawals from retirement accounts have not started either. That creates something rare. A planning window. And let me clean up one point clearly, because this matters. If you heard 57 tied to required minimum distributions, that is simply not the number. The age is 73 under Secure Act 2.0. And starting in 2033, it moves to 75 for people born in 1960 or later. That one rule change quietly stretched the runway. So now think about the gap. You reach 59 and a half. The early withdrawal penalty generally steps out of the way. But your RMDs,
Those required withdrawals the IRS eventually makes you take from traditional retirement accounts may still be many years off.
In some cases, more than a decade off. That gap can be valuable. Because once RMDs begin, you do not get to say, "I'd rather leave that money alone this year." The government has already put a hand on the faucet. Money has to come out. And when larger balances have had more years to grow, those future required withdrawals can get chunky in a hurry. That is where the quiet trap shows up. Bigger RMDs can push more of your income into higher tax brackets. They can also raise your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums through IRMA, that income-related monthly adjustment amount. Awful name. Simple idea. Higher income can mean higher Medicare premiums. And once those forced withdrawals start, your flexibility shrinks. Before that point, you may have room to act on purpose. Maybe that means taking some withdrawals in years when your taxable income is lower. Maybe it means moving some money from a traditional IRA into a Roth account and paying tax on a smaller hill now instead of a bigger mountain later. Not because Roth conversions are magic. They are not. But because timing matters. This is why I want you to see age 59 and a half as more than a rule change. It can open a stretch of years where you still have choices. And choices are valuable. In the next part, I want to turn this idea around in a way that surprises a lot of folks. Sometimes working longer does not improve the tax picture at all. Sometimes it makes the later problem bigger. Now, here's the part that surprises a lot of good, careful people. Most folks assume the safest move is simple. Keep working full-time as long as you can, keep earning, keep saving, and retirement gets safer with every extra year. And sometimes that is true. I want to be fair about that. But sometimes the extra work year helps on one side of the table and quietly hurts you on the other. Here's the quiet trap. A big paycheck in your early 60s can crowd out some of the very years that might have been your best low-tax planning years. If wages are already filling up your tax return, there may be far less room to move money out of a traditional IRA or 401k at a reasonable tax rate. Same story with Roth conversions. The window is there, but your paycheck can slam it halfway shut. Picture David, age 62. He earns $110,000 and says, "I'll just work 3 more years and deal with the IRA later." Sounds sensible. But later may mean he reaches retirement with an even larger tax-deferred bucket. More money sitting in that bucket can mean bigger forced withdrawals down the road. Not because he did something wrong. Just because he waited while the account kept growing. And when those future withdrawals get larger, the sting can spread. Higher taxable income can mean more taxes. It can push other income into a less friendly spot. It can even raise Medicare premiums through those income surcharges. I'm not going deep into the healthcare mechanics here. I just want you to see the chain reaction. One decision today can echo across several bills later. That's why working longer and better outcome are not always the same sentence. Let me give you another one. Susan and Mark are 64 and 63. They could retire now, live partly from savings, and use a few lower income years to do careful Roth conversions. Instead, they both stay in high-paying jobs until 67. They earn more, yes, but they also lose 3 years that may have been ideal for shifting money on their terms instead of the IRS's terms later. More earnings now, less flexibility later. That trade-off is real. And there's one more cost people don't always put on paper. Your early 60s are not just tax years, they are life years. Often healthier years, more mobile years, more let's go while we still feel like going years. I'm not saying everybody should retire early.
Not at all. I'm saying those years have value too, and they belong in the math. If a doctor told someone, these next 5 years are likely to be your strongest active years, that would matter. It should matter financially, yes, but personally too. Work has a price. Delay has a price. And sometimes the cost is not visible until those years are gone. So the real question is not, can I earn more by working longer? Of course you can. The better question is, What am I giving up in taxes, flexibility, and time by waiting? And in the next part, I want to tackle the two objections that usually come right up here. Healthcare, and the big one. How do you know if you actually have enough? Now, let's deal with the two objections I hear all the time. And honestly, they're fair objections. The first one is healthcare before 65. The second is that nagging question. But do I really have enough? Let's start with health insurance, because this one is real. I'm not going to wave it away. If you retire before Medicare starts at 65, that cost can hit hard. For folks in their early 60s, a benchmark ACA plan can easily run around $1,000 to $1,100 a month per person before subsidies. So yes, for a married couple age 62, seeing a rough number around $2,000 a month before tax credits is not crazy at all.
It depends on income, where you live, and the plan you choose. But the point is simple. This is a serious line item. Still, serious does not mean impossible. That's the part many people miss. Healthcare before 65 is not just an expense problem. It's also an income planning problem. And that changes the whole picture. If your taxable income is lower, you may qualify for larger ACA subsidies. In plain English, the less income you show on paper, the more help you may get with premiums. Not always. Not in every case. But often enough that it can make a very big difference. So imagine Jim and Carol, both 62. They assume retiring now means paying the full freight for insurance, maybe around $2,000 a month before credits. That number scares them, and I understand why. But then they sit down and look at where their spending would actually come from. Maybe some comes from cash savings. Maybe some from a brokerage account. Maybe they only need a modest amount from an IRA that shows up as taxable income. Suddenly, the healthcare cost is no longer a brick wall. It becomes a dial you can work with. Take a breath here. This is not about gaming the system. It's about understanding that retirement income is not the same thing as a paycheck. You may have more control than you think. And that matters because the next objection is even heavier. How do you know whether the whole plan is enough? Because that second objection can be just as heavy. People say, Frank, I'd retire if I knew I had the magic number. But most of the time, there is no magic number. There's no single account balance where a bell rings and somebody hands you permission. What matters more is this. What do you need to spend? Where will that money come from? And how flexible is your plan if life changes a little? Yes, people mention the 4% rule. Fine, it can be a useful reference point, a rough measuring stick. But it is not a law of nature, and it is not the whole decision. Two households can have the exact same portfolio and be in completely different shape. Picture two couples. One has $1.5 million and a clear plan. They know their monthly spending. They know what Social Security may cover. They know which accounts they'll tap first and why. They've looked at taxes. They've looked at healthcare. They've built a simple cushion for surprises. Another couple has $4 million and no real strategy at all. They spend loosely. They pull money without thinking about taxes. They don't know what their baseline lifestyle costs. They just hope the big balance will save them. Now, I'm not saying less money is better. Of course not. More assets can give you more room, but a smaller pile with a workable map can be safer than a bigger pile with no map. One is a plan, the other is just a number. And that's the turn I want you to make in your mind. Stop asking only, what number do I need? Start asking, what income do I need, what spending matters most, and how do I build it in the smartest order? That is a much better question, and in the next part, I'm going to give you a simple checklist you can use at the kitchen table to answer it. So let me give you a cleaner way to think about this. Not a guess, not a gut feeling, a framework. Because once you put this on the table in the right order, the fog starts to lift. Step 1 is simple, but most folks skip it. Figure out what life actually costs. Not what you think it costs. Not what some retirement calculator spits out. Look at the last 6 to 12 months of bank and credit card statements and find your real annual spending. Housing, food, insurance, travel, gifts. The ordinary stuff and the irregular stuff. If Carol and Jim spent $78,000 last year, but $12,000 of that was a one-time roof repair, that matters. You are trying to find your real baseline. That number is the floor under this whole decision.
Step 2. Sort your money by when you may need it, not by the label on the account. This is where a lot of fear settles down. Think in buckets. Money needed in the next 1 to 3 years goes in cash or near cash. Safe. Steady. Years 4 through 10 can be in more conservative investments. Not parked under a mattress, but not swinging all over the place either. And money for 10 years and beyond can stay in growth investments. Stocks and stock funds, the part built for later. That way, you are not staring at one big pile of money, wondering if the whole thing is at risk. You are giving each dollar a job. Step 3. Use that age 59 and a half to RMD window on purpose. That stretch can be one of the most valuable planning seasons you will ever get. Maybe that means taking some withdrawals while your tax rate is lower. Maybe it means moving part of an IRA into a Roth through Roth conversions. Not blindly, not all at once, carefully, year by year. This is one of those quiet levers that can change what happens later. Step 4. Stop treating work like an on-off switch. Full-time or nothing is too crude for real life. Maybe the better answer is part-time. Maybe consulting. Maybe seasonal work. Maybe a lower-stress job that covers groceries, travel, or health insurance for a while.
That can reduce what you need from investments and buy you more control. For a lot of people, the right question is not, can I never earn another dollar? It is, what kind of work, if any, still fits the life I want? Big difference. Step 5. Look hard at debt. Debt shrinks flexibility. A mortgage, car payment, or credit card balance means your portfolio has to work harder every single month. And once you can access retirement accounts after 59 and a half without the early withdrawal penalty, that may open up options. Not that every distribution is a good idea. Taxes still matter. But flexibility matters, too. If paying down the wrong debt gives you breathing room, that can change the picture more than people expect. Step 6. Line up Social Security and any pension income with your withdrawal plan. These pieces have to talk to each other. Social Security is not just a filing decision, it is part of the income machine. Very roughly, benefits rise about 5% to 6% per year from age 62 to full retirement age, then about 8% per year from full retirement age to 70. That does not mean everybody should wait, it means timing has value, and that value has to be weighed against what you need from savings in the meantime. Same with a pension.
A pension check can reduce pressure on the portfolio, or it can change which account you tap first. This is where the puzzle starts fitting together. And step 7 may be the most important one of all. Decide what this next chapter is actually for. Not just what you are leaving, but what you are walking toward. Helping with grandkids. Traveling 3 months a year. Volunteering. Fishing on Tuesdays. Caring for a spouse or parent. Starting a small business. If the money plan has no purpose, every decision feels shaky. But when the purpose is clear, the numbers have something to serve. And that makes the whole thing steadier. That is the framework. Not perfect, not fancy, but it turns a vague fear into a set of decisions you can actually make. Let me make this real with a simple example. And I do mean simple. This is just an illustration, not a promise, not a formula. Take Tom and Linda. Let's say they both assumed Tom had to keep working full-time until 65. That was the picture in their heads. 3 more years. No real choice. But once they laid the pieces on the table, the picture changed. They looked at what they actually needed to spend, not what they feared they might spend. They mapped out where the money would come from, year by year.
They saw that if Tom stepped away from full-time work at 62, their taxable income could drop enough to create a very useful window. That window mattered. It gave them room to pull some money from retirement accounts at lower tax rates or convert a portion to Roth while they were still in a lower bracket. Not all at once. Just enough to use the space wisely.
That one move can act like clearing brush before wildfire season. Quiet work now. Fewer problems later. Then came healthcare. Because Tom would be retiring before 65, they had to look at ACA coverage, the Affordable Care Act marketplace. And this is where many folks get surprised. Lower income in those years can sometimes make the coverage more manageable than they expected. Not free, not trivial, but manageable when it's planned alongside taxes instead of treated like a separate problem. And Tom did not have to go from full speed to dead stop. That was another key. He picked up part-time work. Less stress, less income, more flexibility. That meant they did not need to pull as much from investments, and it helped them shape income instead of just reacting to it. So the outcome was very different from the original assumption. They thought full retirement had to wait until 65. After running the numbers in a coordinated way, Tom retiring from full-time work at 62 looked feasible. Not because of magic.
Not because they slashed their life to the bone. Because spending, taxes, healthcare, and work style were all working together instead of fighting each other. And that, my friend, is the real lesson here. Your test is not whether you can copy Tom and Linda, it's whether your own numbers open a similar door. Now let me bring this home the right way. The point here is not that everybody should march out of work at 59 and a half. That is not the lesson. The lesson is that 59.5 changes the conversation. Why? Because that age opens a gate. Not a magic gate. Not a free money gate. A planning gate. It gives you more room to choose. More room to shape taxes. More room to decide when income shows up, where it comes from, and how hard you still need to work. And that matters more than most folks realize. A lot of people carry around one big assumption without ever testing it: I have to keep working full-time until some later age. But sometimes that is not a fact. Sometimes it is just an old guess. And a guess can keep you on the treadmill years longer than necessary. If this feels like a big mental shift, that is okay. It is supposed to be. You are not giving yourself blind permission to retire. You are giving yourself permission to stop assuming.
Big difference. Once fear gets replaced with numbers, and numbers get organized into a simple plan, the picture often changes. Not always, but often enough to matter. Full-time work may still be the right choice. Or maybe part-time fits better. Maybe consulting. Maybe seasonal work. Maybe a slower runway instead of a hard stop. That is the real payoff here. Options. So here is the question I want you to sit with at the kitchen table. If full-time work stopped tomorrow, or even scaled back, how much monthly income would your investments actually need to produce to cover the gap? Because that answer tells you far more than a big round account balance ever will.